Nobody knew who she was, until one shot silenced them all. This story begins on a quiet Saturday morning at Fort Braxton military base in North Carolina. The civilian shooting range was buzzing with its usual weekend crowd. Among them walked Sarah Mitchell, a 28-year-old trauma nurse from Charlotte General Hospital. She wore simple athletic clothes, her auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. To everyone around her, she looked like just another civilian trying out shooting for the first time. The range was packed that day, mostly active-duty soldiers and retired veterans who treated this place like their second home. Staff Sergeant Mike Rodriguez was there with his buddies from the 82nd Airborne. Lieutenant Brad Thompson was practicing with his sidearm. Master Sergeant Frank Williams had driven down from Fort Liberty with his son, teaching him the basics of marksmanship. Sarah approached the registration desk, where Corporal Jenkins, a young soldier working part-time, looked up with a friendly smile. "First time here, ma'am." "Yes, it is," Sarah replied softly, her voice barely audible over the distant sound of gunfire from the indoor ranges. Rodriguez overheard the conversation and chuckled. "Well, you picked a good day to start. We've got some real shooters here today. You might learn a thing or two." Thompson nodded in agreement. "I'd recommend starting with the .22 caliber, much easier on a beginner. The 9mm can be pretty intimidating for someone new." Williams walked over, adjusting his veteran baseball cap. "Ma'am, I've been shooting for 25 years. My advice? Start close, maybe 7 yards, and don't expect too much on your first day. Shooting is harder than it looks in the movies." Sarah smiled politely. "Thank you all for the advice. I really appreciate it." Jenkins handed her the safety waiver and range rules. "Just so you know, we require everyone to watch the safety video first. It's about 10 minutes, covers all the basics." "Of course," Sarah agreed, settling into the small viewing area. Hook won, but the most shocking part was yet to come. As Sarah watched the safety video, Rodriguez and his crew continued their conversation nearby. "You know what I love about this place?" Rodriguez said, loading his Glock 19. "It's where you can always tell who's military and who's civilian. Military guys, we have that stance, that grip, that confidence. Civilians, well, they usually flinch a lot." Thompson laughed. "Remember that executive who came in last month? CEO of some tech company. Thought he was going to be John Wick. Couldn't hit the broadside of a barn from 10 feet. Or that lawyer from Raleigh," Williams added. "Talked a big game about his gun collection, then nearly dropped his pistol when it recoiled." Their conversation was interrupted when the safety video ended and Sarah approached the counter to rent her firearm. "I'd like to rent a pistol, please." "What caliber were you thinking?" Jenkins asked. "We've got .22s that are perfect for beginners, or if you're feeling ambitious, we have 9mm. "I'll take the 9mm Glock 17, please," Sarah said without hesitation. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "Jumping right into the deep end, huh? Respect." Sarah completed her paperwork, purchased her ammunition, and received her lane assignment, Lane 7, right between Rodriguez in Lane 6 and Thompson in Lane 8. Williams had taken Lane 9 with his son. As she walked toward her lane, carrying the rental case and ammunition, Thompson called out, "Hey, if you need any tips, just ask. We're all here to help." Sarah set up her station methodically. She opened the case, removed the Glock 17, and began her inspection. Her movements were fluid, but unremarkable, the kind of routine check any responsible shooter might perform. The range officer, Sergeant First Class Davis, made his rounds. "Everyone clear on the range rules? Muzzle down range at all times, finger off the trigger unless you're shooting, no rapid fire." "Roger that, Sergeant," came the collective response from the military guys. Sarah loaded her magazine quietly. 15 rounds of 9mm ammunition. She inserted the magazine with a decisive click and chambered a round. Rehook 2. And that's when everyone learned the truth. The first relay began with 10-yard targets. Rodriguez started strong, his shots grouping nicely in the 8 and 9 rings. "Not bad for warming up," he muttered to himself. Thompson was equally impressive, most of his rounds finding the center mass area. "Feeling good today," he announced. Williams, coaching his son, was also shooting well. See, Danny? Breathe in, hold, squeeze slowly, follow through. Sarah raised her pistol for the first time. Her stance was different. Not obviously military, but not obviously civilian either. She took her time, aligning her sights carefully. Her first shot echoed through the range. 10 ring, Davis called out, checking the spotting scope. Dead center. Rodriguez glanced over. Nice shot, beginner's luck is real. Sarah fired her second round, another perfect 10. Thompson started paying attention. 2 for 2, that's pretty good shooting. Third shot, 10 ring. Fourth shot, 10 ring. Fifth shot, 10 ring. By now, the shooting in adjacent lanes had slowed considerably. Rodriguez lowered his pistol and stared at Sarah's target through his scope. What the hell? 5 shots? 5 perfect 10s? Thompson was equally bewildered. That's not normal. That's not normal at all. Davis walked over to inspect Sarah's target more closely. The 5 bullet holes were clustered so tightly in the center that they almost formed a single ragged hole. Ma'am, this is exceptional shooting. Have you had formal training? Sarah paused, seeming to consider her words carefully. I've had some instruction. Some instruction? Williams had joined the small crowd gathering around Lane 7. Lady, this isn't some instruction. This is expert-level marksmanship. Rehook 3. But no one could have guessed her true identity. Davis made a decision. Ma'am, would you be interested in trying the 25-yard targets? I think you're ready for more of a challenge. Sarah nodded. I'd like that. The targets were changed out to 25 yards, a distance that separated the good shooters from the great ones. Rodriguez and Thompson decided to shoot alongside her, curious to see how she'd perform at the longer range. Now it gets interesting, Rodriguez muttered. 25 yards is where technique really matters. Sarah took her position again. This time, her preparation was more deliberate. She adjusted her stance slightly, checked her sight alignment with extra care, and controlled her breathing with the precision of a yoga instructor. Her first shot at 25 yards rang out. Davis checked the scope. 10 ring, dead center. The murmur of conversation on the range died down as shooters in other lanes began to notice what was happening in Lane 7. Second shot, perfect 10. Third shot, perfect 10. By the fifth shot, Sarah had achieved something that Davis had rarely seen in his 15 years of range management, a perfect group at 25 yards with a service pistol. Rodriguez set down his gun entirely. Okay, I give up. Who are you really? FBI? Secret Service? Thompson was examining Sarah's target with a magnifier. These shots are so close together you could cover them with a quarter. I've seen competitive shooters who can't do this. Williams approached Sarah directly. Ma'am, with all due respect, this level of shooting doesn't come from weekend classes at the local gun store. This is professional-grade marksmanship. Rehook. 4. Then something happened that changed everything. At that moment, the range door opened, and in walked a figure that made every military person on the range straighten up slightly. Colonel Jack Morrison, 59 years old, the legendary marksmanship instructor who had trained more elite snipers than any other person in the Army. Although retired, he still consulted at various military facilities and was a fixture at Fort Braxton. Morrison had the kind of presence that commanded respect without saying a word. Silver hair, steel-gray eyes, and the bearing of someone who had spent decades in service to his country. He noticed the crowd gathered around Lane 7 and approached with interest. "What's all the excitement about?" Morrison asked Davis. "Colonel, this civilian just shot 2 perfect groups, 10 yards and 25 yards, every shot center mass." Morrison walked over to examine Sarah's targets. His expression grew more serious as he studied the tight groupings. This wasn't just good shooting. This was the kind of precision he had seen only in his most elite students. "Ma'am," Morrison said, addressing Sarah directly, "could I ask your name?" "Sarah Mitchell," she replied, meeting his gaze steadily. Morrison's eyebrows furrowed. The name seemed familiar, but he couldn't quite place it. Sarah Mitchell. Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell. Something shifted in Sarah's posture. A subtle change, but noticeable to someone with Morrison's experience. Yes, sir. Morrison's eyes widened as recognition dawned. My God. Charlie Company, 3rd Battalion, Operation Desert Shield. The range fell completely silent. Rodriguez whispered to Thompson, "Who is she?" Morrison looked at Sarah with a mixture of pride and amazement. "Gentlemen, may I introduce Staff Sergeant Sarah Mitchell, formerly of the Army's elite sniper program, one of the finest marksmen I've ever had the privilege to train." Rehook 5. And in that moment, silence gave way to respect. The revelation hit the range like a thunderbolt. Thompson's mouth hung open. Rodriguez actually took a step back. Williams removed his cap in a gesture of respect. Morrison continued, his voice carrying the weight of memory. "Sarah graduated from my advanced sniper course 7 years ago. She completed the program with a 98% accuracy rating at distances up to 1,500 meters. Only 3 students in the history of my program achieved that level of proficiency." "But you're a nurse," Thompson said, still trying to process this information. Sarah smiled gently. "I am now. After I left the Army, I went to nursing school. I work in the trauma unit at Charlotte General." Morrison nodded approvingly. Sarah served 3 tours in Afghanistan. She was part of some of the most challenging missions in the region. Her confirmed count was... What was it, Sarah? 47 confirmed, Sarah said quietly. "But I prefer not to dwell on those numbers anymore." Rodriguez found his voice. 47 confirmed kills? Jesus Christ, you're a legend. "I was a soldier," Sarah corrected gently. "Now I'm a nurse. I prefer saving lives to taking them." Morrison's expression softened with paternal pride. "Sarah represents the very best of what our military produces. Not just technical skill, but character, integrity, the wisdom to know when to fight and when to heal." Williams stepped forward. "Ma'am, I owe you an apology. We all do. We made assumptions." "No apology necessary," Sarah interrupted. "You had no way of knowing. And honestly, I prefer it that way. My past is my past. What matters is what I do now." Davis, still somewhat stunned, managed to ask, Would you be willing to demonstrate some long-range shooting? We have targets out to 300 yards. Sarah looked to Morrison, who nodded encouragingly. "I think I'd enjoy that." Morrison walked to the rifle rack and selected a Remington 700 with a high-powered scope. "This should feel familiar," he said, handing it to Sarah. The rifle seemed to transform in Sarah's hands. Gone was any pretense of being a casual weekend shooter. She handled the weapon with the familiarity of someone who had relied on such tools for survival. 300 yards is a significant challenge, Morrison explained to the gathered crowd. Wind conditions, humidity, temperature, they all affect bullet trajectory at that distance. Sarah spent several minutes examining the rifle, checking the scope 0, testing the trigger pull. She requested the ballistic data for the ammunition they were using and made mental calculations that impressed even Morrison. "Conditions look stable," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. The 300-yard target was set up. Sarah took position at the designated long-range firing point. She assumed a prone position with the fluid grace of someone who had done this thousands of times under much more stressful conditions. The range fell silent again. Even shooters on other lanes had stopped to watch. Sarah's preparation ritual was methodical and calming to watch. She adjusted her position minutely, controlled her breathing, and began her sight picture. For long moments she remained perfectly still, reading wind conditions and making final calculations. Then she fired. "Center mass," Davis announced through the spotting scope. "Dead center." Spontaneous applause broke out across the range. "Another one," Morrison requested with a slight smile. Sarah chambered another round. This time she took less preparation time, having already established her 0 and read the conditions. Her second shot was even more precise than the first. "Touching the first hole," Davis called out, amazement clear in his voice. Rodriguez shook his head in disbelief. "I've been in the Army for 12 years, and I've never seen shooting like this outside of special operations units," Thompson added. "And you're doing this with a rifle you've never shot before, on a range you've never been to." Sarah stood up and handed the rifle back to Morrison. "Muscle memory," she said simply. Some things you never forget. Morrison accepted the rifle with ceremony. Sarah, you're still the best natural shooter I've ever trained, but more importantly, you've become something even better, a healer. Thank you, Colonel. That means everything coming from you. The crowd began to disperse, but not before each person approached Sarah individually. Rodriguez shook her hand firmly. Ma'am, it's been an honor. Thank you for your service. Thompson echoed the sentiment. I'm sorry we underestimated you. You're incredible. Williams brought his son over. Danny, I want you to meet a real American hero. This is Staff Sergeant Mitchell. Sarah knelt down to the boy's eye level. Just call me Sarah, and remember, being a hero isn't about how well you can shoot. It's about using whatever skills you have to help other people. As the afternoon wound down, Sarah began packing up her gear. Morrison approached her one final time. Sarah, I have to ask, why don't you tell people about your background? You have every right to be proud of your service. Sarah considered the question thoughtfully. Because, Colonel, I learned something important after I left the Army. The most powerful thing about having deadly skills is choosing not to use them. Every day I go to work at the hospital, I get to use everything the Army taught me. Discipline, focus, working under pressure, but instead of taking lives, I save them. Morrison nodded with deep understanding. That's why you were always my best student. True strength isn't about what you can destroy. It's about what you can build. You taught me that, Sarah said. Maybe not directly, but you taught me that precision matters, that every shot has consequences, and that the greatest victory is the battle you don't have to fight. Davis approached with a range card. Well, ma'am, I've documented today's scores. This is going in our record books. Would you be willing to sign it? Sarah took the card and pen. Under her signature, she wrote, "In memory of those who can't come home, and in honor of those who still can." As Sarah prepared to leave, the entire range seemed different. Word had spread quickly, and even shooters who hadn't witnessed her demonstration came over to pay their respects. Rodriguez called out as she reached the door. Sarah, one more question, she turned back. With skills like yours, why nursing? You could have done anything, Sarah smiled, her hand on the door handle. Because every trigger I don't pull is a life I might save instead, and that's the most accurate shot I can take. She walked out into the North Carolina sunshine, leaving behind a range full of soldiers who would never forget the quiet nurse who reminded them that the greatest warriors are sometimes the ones who choose not to fight. Morrison watched her go, then turned to the assembled group. Gentlemen, today you met someone special. Remember this. The most dangerous people in the world are often the most peaceful. They understand the true cost of violence, and they choose mercy instead. Davis was still studying the targets Sarah had shot. Colonel, in all your years of training snipers, how many could shoot like that? Morrison thought for a moment. Maybe a dozen. But Sarah was different from the others. She never shot to prove she could. She shot because she had to. And when she didn't have to anymore, she stopped. That's the mark of a true professional. The range slowly returned to normal activity, but the story of the nurse who silenced the range with a single shot would be told and retold for years to come. It became part of Fort Braxton's folklore, a reminder that heroes walk among us every day, often unrecognized, always humble. Back at Charlotte General Hospital on Monday morning, Sarah Mitchell resumed her duties in the trauma unit. Her colleagues had no idea that their quiet, competent team member had just reminded a range full of soldiers what real expertise looked like. But Sarah preferred it that way. She had learned that the greatest power often lies in choosing not to use it, and the most profound victories are won with compassion rather than ammunition. And every life she saved in that trauma unit was a testament to the lesson she had learned in the military, that the most important target is the one you choose not to engage.